On April 3rd, 2024, Mexican TikToker Vielka Pulido and her boyfriend were gunned down right outside the gym where they frequently worked out.
La popular influencer de Puebla, Vielka Pulido, conocida como Lady Humilladora desde 2018, tras un incidente donde obligó a una mujer a disculparse de rodillas, fue víctima de un tiroteo junto a su novio. El atentado tuvo lugar en la colonia Santa Cruz Buenavista de Puebla, mientras las víctimas salían de un gimnasio y se disponían a abordar su vehículo.
The shooting took place at Beats Fitness Center in Santa Cruz Buenavista, and what's crazy is that Pulido became a target over an incident that happened way back in 2018. Context: Pulido was a medical student who had a large following on TikTok and Instagram, but she first hit the public eye as a teenager when a video of her became viral, and in the clip, she made another girl get on her knees and apologize before a group of people to resolve a conflict. And because of that demeaning video, the internet gave her the nickname Lady Humilladora, which translates to Lady Humiliation. Pulido, however, received a lot of criticism for that video, and being just a teen at the time, her mom had to hold a press conference to apologize and try to explain her actions. The video became famous across Mexico, and we think that a few cartels noticed it, and we know what occurs when it comes to cartel justice. You don't simply forget some things. You see, cartels feign they follow some kind of code, but in truth, they make up this shay'at as they go. They ruin communities, sell drugs, take innocent lives without a single thought. The moment someone robs them, disrespects the wrong person, or even offends them in the slightest, that's when they all at once care about justice. Sure, Pulido made a mistake, but her mother apologized, and most people moved on. But maybe not the cartel. They didn't care if you were famous or a nobody. If you cross their unseen line, you're a target. Now, months after the humiliation video blew up, Pulido stepped away from social media for some time, but over time, she made a comeback. She began posting again, sharing pieces of her life and even managing online businesses, selling perfumes and beauty treatments. She went by La Bendy on social media and had a good following. 29,000 on Instagram and over 14,000 on TikTok. Some of her TikTok videos were getting over 1 million views. Then came the day it all finished. Surveillance footage captured everything. Her white BMW was stationary when a grey Hyundai pulls up alongside it. Out of the blue, someone opened fire. The sound of gunfire sent people fleeing for cover, and a total of 26 bullets were shot. Her boyfriend, 41-year-old Joel Abraham Chavez, took the majority of it. While Pulido was hit all over her body, even after her passing, people in Mexico were still discussing that viral video. Some comments were completely cruel, saying things like, "We're all equal and all finish up in the cemetery or an incinerator." This leads us to believe that she was targeted by cartel sicarios or perhaps even local gangs based on that clip. However, Mexican officials don't believe so. Right now, investigators think that the real target was Pulido's boyfriend, Joel Abraham Chavez. According to the Attorney General's office in Puebla, he could have been involved in some shady business, and the attack was probably a settling of scores. The reality is a mystery. The killer vanished. And even though security footage recorded the whole thing, the video was too grainy to make out a car's license plate. At the location, police found multiple bullet casings, but no arrests were made. No shooter was ever identified. And just like that, Pulido and her boyfriend became just another case buried under a mountain of unanswered questions. On December 9th, 2024, Mexican TikTok star Gordo Percuy and his wife were brutally murdered right outside their home in Culiacan, Mexico. The 37-year-old, whose actual name was Leovardo Azipuro Soto, was hit many times and died instantly, while his wife, Brenda Felix, was rushed to the hospital in a critical condition but didn't survive either. The assault happened around 10 p.m., and to date, police have a whole lot of nothing. No suspects, no arrests, just another murder case in a city overcome by cartel violence. Well, Percuy wasn't some controversial person stirring up trouble. This man was known for making people laugh, creating a massive fan base. 1 million on TikTok, 470,000 on Instagram, and 170,000 on YouTube, where he published sketches and funny stories. He also gained even more notice for his collaborations with Marquitos Toys, the influencer we mentioned before, with 4.8 million on Instagram. But here's where things get interesting. Before his death, Percuy recently escaped to Cuba, claiming that his businesses had been attacked by a criminal organization. And if you know anything about how things operate in Culiacan, that makes sense. Cartels aren't only about drugs, they also run their own perverted version of a tax system. They exploit business owners, demanding protection money, and if someone quits paying, well, let's just say the late penalties are deadly. So maybe Perkui had been complying at one point and decided to stop giving over cash. So, in cartel reasoning, that's more than enough cause to make sure he never sees another day. It's confirmed that he was murdered by a drug gang, most likely connected to the Sinaloa cartel. This is popular TikToker Sabrina Duran Montero, just months before she was shot in broad daylight for tangling with one of Chile's most dangerous drug cartels. October 23, 2023. Sabrina was murdered in southeast Santiago by two cartel assassins. But her story did not start that day. It really began in May 2022, when a massive police operation resulted in her and her brothers getting arrested for running a drug enterprise in Chile. Sabrina wasn't simply a social media star, she was managing a drug trafficking group, and they weren't the only ones around. Another gang operating in Las Praderas was their biggest rival. A turf war turned the once tranquil area into a nightmare where people lived in terror. Things got so terrible that the Chilean government sent 100 detectives to crack down on these criminal groups, checking every street and every house. And during one of those raids, Sabrina attempted to escape by jumping out the back window of her hideout, but she was apprehended. She was charged with drug-related offenses and sentenced to 3 years in jail. But instead of keeping a low profile, prison life made her more famous. While behind bars, Sabrina became one of the biggest influencers on TikTok, acquiring over 610,000 followers under the username @Katrina Guzman, a name taken from the infamous Mexican cartel boss Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. She also went by La Ina and the TikTok narco queen. And if you are wondering how she even managed to run an account from inside prison, let's just say Sabrina had her methods. At one juncture, she even tried to break out of prison by jumping from the third-floor window. That attempt failed and she was sent right back. However, none of that compared to what occurred after she was released on supervised probation. Sabrina kept up her influencer life, posting videos of her flashing gold jewelry and expensive designer clothes. To her followers, she seemed like she was living the dream. But behind the curtain, she was in peril. Why? Because her growing fame was putting a spotlight on her secret life. The more she posted, the more people admired her in the world she came from, and that was a difficulty. Not just for her enemies, but for the Chilean government and even her own gang. Sabrina had become too much of a risk now, and that meant one thing: she had to disappear. On the day she died, Sabrina was going to a nail salon when 3 masked assassins stopped her car. They made her get out and then shot her 8 times. A bystander filmed everything, capturing the moment the once powerful TikToker lay bleeding on the pavement, helpless. After the shooting, the masked men would take her car and drive it far away from the scene and set it ablaze. Emergency services rushed her to the hospital, but she had lost too much blood. And as of now, no arrests have been made, and the Chilean police have no official suspects. But again, one thing is certain: Sabrina Duran Montero's murder was just one of many in a world where cartel violence occurs every day, most of which the media never really covers. In October 2024, a man has gone down in the avenues of Culiacan, Mexico. At first, he was another name added to the city's crime data, but it soon turns out that authorities knew him as Juan Carlos Lopez, better known as El Chilango, a TikToker making a name for himself by peddling candy on the streets.
Dentro de la ola de violencia en Sinaloa, se dio a conocer que el TikToker conocido como El Chilango, Juan Carlos N., fue asesinado el domingo mientras vendía productos en una avenida.
And while he wasn't the kind of person you'd expect to be caught up in cartel business, that's precisely what happened. That evening, around 7:45 p.m., El Chilango was in the middle of recording one of his usual videos near Isla Musala.
Amiga la gente del Chapo, del Ratón, de Iván,
when shooting erupted. His attackers arrived armed with high-powered weapons, leaving him with almost no chance of surviving, and in a matter of seconds his body fell onto the pavement near a gas station. By the time police got there was nothing left to save. El Chilango was deceased. Now, we know what you are thinking. Why would a billion-dollar cartel, a global empire of drugs, money, and power, care about someone as minor as a TikToker? What could they possibly want with a man filming candy sales? Well, the answer might surprise you, because in today's world, influencers aren't just people with a camera and a following, they are a currency, and cartels have figured out how to profit. We live in a time where social media rules everything, and while you are scrolling through dance challenges and food hacks, drug cartels are playing an entirely different game, using influencers to launder money, find new members, and expand their reach. Think of it like a present-day version of washing your drug money through nightclubs, except now it is through TikTok views and YouTube sponsorships. Here is how they do it. Cartels invest in influencers, funding their content, paying for flashy production, and even improving their engagement with fake likes and views. In return, these puppets channel a chunk of their illegally earned money right back to the cartel, making dirty cash look completely clean. No shady suitcases full of bills, no sketchy bank transfers, just brand deals, ad revenue, and a social media salary that, on paper, looks perfectly legal. And it is not just about the money. These influencers are also selling an idea, the cartel life. Luxury cars, designer clothes, stacks of cash, all wrapped up in a flashy, viral-ready package. To the millions of young people watching, it appears like the ultimate dream. And that is exactly what the cartels want. They don't need to chase down recruits anymore. They are coming directly to them. So now you are asking, what does this have to do with El Chilango? Well, it turns out he had a tendency of mentioning Los Chapitos in his TikTok videos. Los Chapitos being the sons of El Chapo, headed by Ivan Archivaldo Guzman. And so, El Chilango would show up in videos.
¿Ves esta historia, amigo? Te extraño. Y gracias por siempre por todo.
With Marquitos Toys, a YouTuber who also allegedly has deep ties to Los Chapitos. Now here is where it gets complicated, because Marquitos wasn't just an artist. He was actually involved in funding Los Chapitos' war against a rival faction called La Mayiza. And if there is one thing you don't want to do in cartel land, it's blur the line between content creator and criminal. Even something as tiny as an emoji can be a death sentence. In several videos, El Chilango used pizza slice emojis, which might appear harmless, but in cartel slang, it's loyalty to Los Chapitos. Meanwhile, their rival, La Mayiza, uses the sombrero symbol. Guys, these aren't fun little icons, they're warnings. And when bodies start turning up with the same symbols left near them, it is the cartel's way of making it clear who was at that conflict. So whether El Chilango knew what he was doing or not, one thing was definite. He had picked a side. And in cartel business, can the wrong side get you killed? That is precisely what happened. For his supposed loyalty to Los Chapitos, El Chilango was killed in broad daylight, his body left out as a warning. Because when you tangle with cartels, you don't get a second chance to tell the tale. Fedra Gaxiola. On December 4th, 2024, Fedra Gaxiola, a Mexican fitness influencer and businesswoman, was executed in broad daylight outside Hardcore Gym in Tijuana. It was 8:30 a.m., and she had just gotten into her black Mercedes-Benz when a man came up and fired multiple shots and then sped away in a PT Cruiser. Paramedics brought her to the hospital, but there was nothing they could do. She was deceased. Her 217,000 Instagram followers and thousands of TikTok followers knew her for her fitness advice, fashion posts, and lifestyle content. She also co-founded Floor Clothing with influencer Sol Leon, and her last Instagram post pictured her doing what she loved, modeling outfits from her store while sitting in the same car where she'd take her last breath. But here is the thing, this wasn't the first time violence had reached her. Fedra was from Sinaloa, a region where cartel influence isn't just powerful, it's daily life. And this wasn't even the first time someone had attempted to kill her. Back in 2011, she survived a shooting while inside a Beamer in the Hippodromo neighborhood. Then, in 2018, her partner was shot dead right before her and her young son in Colonia Agua Caliente. The case goes cold, and authorities went strangely silent about it. And if you are thinking that's wild, wait until you hear what I am about to tell next. Because just a few months before her murder, in August 2024, Fedra goes on Instagram Live and does something brave. She publicly accuses her then-boyfriend, Hector Villegas Barqueto, a former director of the Tijuana Municipal Police, of domestic abuse. Then she uploads a video showing Hector shirtless, walking around their apartment while allegedly calling the police for assistance. And then she hit him with that statement that would come back to haunt this whole story. "Are you going to tell police that you struck me, dude?" The post didn't last long. She removed it, and the complaint disappeared just as fast. But anyone who has been around long enough knows how things operate in places like Tijuana. You don't just reveal a former police chief, especially one rumored to have connections with the people who run the streets, and expect to just walk away unharmed. Hector wasn't just any cop there. People whispered about his cartel connections long before Fedra put him on blast. And if those rumors were correct, she had just put a target on her own back. I mean, it doesn't take much imagination to connect any type of dot. She embarrassed a man who, let's be honest, probably wasn't used to being told no. Maybe he didn't pull the trigger himself, but he did not have to. In places like this, if you know the right people, you don't get your hands dirty. Just speak the word. And then, just a few months after revealing him, Fedra was dead, shot in a well-planned assault. The gunman knew where she'd be, what car she drove, and when to attack. The precision was too perfect, and the motive is suspiciously clear. Now, officially, there is no direct evidence linking her murder to her ex or to the cartel. Come on, Tijuana's justice system doesn't exactly scream great history. No arrests, no suspects, and as expected, no real investigation. Just another case of an influencer's life cut short in a place where power, corruption, and secrecy go hand in hand. Azucena Uresti. Earlier this week, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel posted a video online in which they directly threatened Uresti.
Sean parejos porque yo no estoy en contra de la libertad de expresión. Aquí, a la orden, el señor Rubén Oseguera Cervantes, su amigo para los que me quieran. Te lo aseguro que donde sea que estés, doy contigo. Y te haré que te comas tus palabras, aunque me acusen de feminicidio. Porque no me conocen a mí, Rubén Oseguera Cervantes, que yo no soy cobracuotas.
Earlier this week, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel posted a video online in which they directly threatened Uresti.
August 2021. TikToker and newscaster Azucena Uresti imprinted her name among those in the bad books of the CJNG. She became a target for the criminal organization after they released a message calling her biased and a supporter of self-defense groups in Mexico. Ms. Uresti is heavily involved with the press, and as of now, what seems to be her TikTok account has been made private. In the video released by the CJNG, 6 sicarios are dressed in black attire and carrying automated weapons, while a 7th man, who said he is representing El Mencho, sat down and delivered his message to Ms. Uresti. The spokesperson said, "I am not against freedom of expression, but I am against anyone that harms me." He went on to talk about how the cartel would find and kill Ms. Uresti for damaging the name of their organization. Now, according to their side of the tale, the vigilante groups Ms. Uresti claims are peacemakers in Mexico are, in reality, drug traffickers in disguise. These vigilante groups have undergone countless attacks on different cartels to paint themselves as saviors to the Mexican government. However, the CJNG believes that they are just another deadbeat group looking to eat from the profits of the Mexican narcotics underworld. They also claimed that only a cartel could possess that type of ammunition that these vigilante groups possessed. However, Ms. Uresti's life became a national concern because after the CJNG's video went viral, the Mexican president, Obrador, assured the country that nothing was going to happen to any Mexican or even Ms. Uresti for speaking the truth. In his statement, he said, "It is our duty that Mexicans are not intimidated or threatened by anyone." The presidential spokesman, Jesus Cuevas, tweeted a post about the incident saying, "The government would take the necessary steps to protect any member of the press from speaking their mind." Then Ms. Uresti spoke for herself, saying that she was now under the protection of the government and didn't seem troubled by this statement from the CJNG. Since then, Ms. Uresti has been living her life, and there have been no assaults against her. It could be that the CJNG has decided to just let her be, or they could be waiting for the opportune time to strike. Either way, journalism is a hard job in Mexico, and I don't see why Ms. Uresti should blindly put her trust in a government that has sat back and watched hundreds of journalists before her die at the hands of different cartels. So maybe Ms. Uresti is the only TikToker and social media personality to mess with a cartel and get away with it. Maybe one day she will pay the price.
Y bueno, en Sinaloa, varias cosas, la violencia no se detiene. Ayer estaba haciendo ejercicio y fue asesinado el influencer Adal Peña.
Adal Peña on January 23, 2025, Mexican police got a call about a body on Boulevard Rolando Arjona Amabilis in the city of Culiacan, and by the time they arrived there, the body was confirmed to be that of 42-year-old social media influencer and TikToker Adal Peña. But why Peña? Why would anyone want him murdered? People thought he hadn't crossed any individuals, and he hadn't messed with any cartel. His only crime was living in one of the most dangerous places in all of Mexico, Culiacan, Sinaloa. And that right there is sufficient to make you a target. Culiacan, home of the Sinaloa cartel, has always had a reputation for hostility. But ever since El Chapo was imprisoned in the US and El Mayo was taken down, things have only gotten worse. The Sinaloa cartel, once a unified organization, now has splintered into factions, each one fighting for control in their own territories. Los Chapitos, the sons of El Chapo, are at war with Los Mayitos, the followers of El Mayo's offspring. Violence has turned the city into a war zone, with heavily armed men moving through the streets like they own them. And in a sense they do, because even with thousands of federal troops stationed in that city, it is the cartel who calls the shots. That is why residents always live in terror. Businesses close early and schools shut down with little notice. Once the sun goes down, the streets empty. It is not paranoia, it's survival. Shootouts can happen anywhere, at any moment. Masked gunmen ride around on bikes and scooters, observing everything, waiting to sound the alarm if some rival group or the military gets too close. There is no way to tell who is who anymore, and no one wants to be caught in the crossfire. The city isn't just perilous, it's suffocating. But somehow, that is where TikToker Adal Peña lived with his wife and son. Peña, or El Tata, as people knew him online, wasn't a lawbreaker, he wasn't a gangster or even some cartel soldier. This guy was a fitness influencer, a man who had once turned his life around after battling with addiction. He had nearly 170,000 followers on TikTok and over 21,000 on Instagram, sharing workout routines, diet advice, and motivational speeches about overcoming his demons. He had a history, sure, but his present was all about self-improvement. He wanted to inspire people, and for many of them, he did. However, on that terrible morning, he went out for his usual run near Plaza Vancouver in the Tres Rios neighborhood. It should have been just another exercise, but at some point an armed group attacked him, firing all over the place and leaving him with zero chance to flee. The news struck the community hard, and his wife posted this gut-wrenching tribute online saying he would always be in their hearts. His followers flooded social media with condolences, stunned that someone who had motivated so many could be taken so violently and so simply. People were grieving Adal and also what his death symbolized, another life lost to the chaos of a city drowning in violence. Then came the theories. Some said he was related to Jesus Peña González, known as El Veinte, a high-ranking member of Los Antrax, one of the Sinaloa cartel's enforcer units. Others pointed to the fact that his past struggles with addiction might have put him in contact with the wrong crowd. But hey, there's no evidence, no real connection. These are rumors flying around, as they always do when someone dies in a place like this. But speculation doesn't alter the reality. Adal Peña wasn't part of the cartel world. He wasn't caught up in their conflicts. He had fought his own battles and had won. He had no reason dying like this. But in a place like Culiacan, sometimes that does not matter. Remember those names on the leaflet we mentioned before? Well, he was one of them. El Pinky. Now, we really don't know how to explain this, but just know that the story of Mexican YouTuber and TikToker El Pinky is going to send chills down your spine, because El Pinky died for one reason and one reason alone. He worked with the enemy, and in Sinaloa, that's a death sentence. On January 10th, 2025, popular YouTuber El Peña, real name Agustin Paul, was found dead in Culiacan, Mexico. His body told a gruesome story, signs of torture, bound hands and feet, and a single gunshot wound to the head. Authorities quickly linked that execution to the Sinaloa cartel, a brutal cartel known for handling their traitors. El Pinky, though, never made his ties to the criminal underworld public. His YouTube channel, Los Plebes de Baranos, with over 100,000 subs, was focused on viral challenges and comedic skits, while his Instagram and TikTok both showed the side of a fun-loving guy. But like we already teased in the beginning, his murder didn't come out of nowhere. Barely a day before his death, flyers were dropped from a plane over Culiacan, publicly accusing him of laundering money for La Maíza. And it wasn't just baseless threats here, because other names on that hit list included Peso Pluma and fellow YouTuber Marquitos Toys, proving that social media influence has real-world power. Yet, it doesn't even end here. Hours after El Pinky's body is found near the Benito Juárez State Bypass, a video surfaces online showing him bruised, bloodied, and bound.
¿Qué tienen aquí? Porque les pasaba información del MF. ¿Qué información les pasabas? que pues la ubicación donde se encontraban los chapos. ¿Y a quién se la mandabas esa información? A Lupe Campos y Noé Campos, integrantes del Cartel MF.
In the footage, he's being interrogated by cartel members, forced to answer accusations that he was working with La Maiza. Now, experts say that his murder wasn't just a hit, it was another public warning from Los Chapitos. You see, in these cartel wars, influencers with reach are viewed as prime targets, especially if they're seen sympathizing with rival groups, or even associating with them in any shape or form. So, El Pinky's association with La Maiza sealed his fate. His murder was a message. This is what happens when you cross Los Chapitos. But trust us, he's not the only guy on this list that got horribly, and we're definitely going to talk about it in this video. El Jaspers. On November 23, 2024, Miguel Vivanco, better known as El Jasper, was found dead on a dirt path near El Ranchito just 2 days after he was reported missing. Now, the details of his death were nothing short of savage. The 29-year-old YouTuber had been shot at least 70 times, his hands tied, his eyes taped shut. His body was left on a remote road that connected the Ley 20 highway to the Culiacan-El Dorado route. Chilling videos online showed a blindfolded casualty lying lifeless on the ground. El Jasper, a native of Culiacan, gained social media fame through his collaborations with fellow influencer Marquitos Toys, a popular Mexican content creator whom we've already mentioned, with over 5 million Instagram followers. Toys, real name Marcos Eduardo Castro, is widely rumored to have connections to Los Chapitos, the famous Sinaloa faction. El Jasper was allegedly linked to him as well, although no one has officially claimed responsibility for his killing. His family revealed, however, to Spanish media that just days before his disappearance, a group of armed men entered his home in Sinaloa. Only months before his death, in September 2024, Mexico's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, added El Jasper's name to a list of sanctioned people as part of an anti-drug operation. The report suggested that his friend, Marquitos Toys, had been profiting from cartel business. However, Toys denied any involvement, insisting in a series of Instagram stories that his fortune came from his online success. But he would also defend his close relationship with Nestor Isidro Perez Salas, aka El Nini, the head of security for Los Chapitos, claiming their friendship was private and had nothing to do with criminal activity. But despite his denials, suspicions continued to circulate. When El Jasper's body was discovered, it was clear that he had suffered extreme torture. His eyes were covered with green tape, his hands bound, and his entire body riddled with bullets. Authorities believed the killing may have been a message from Los Chapitos. So, given his previous connections to cartel activity, his violent end raises a lot of questions about what really led to his death. That murder is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle, one that paints a terrifying image of cartel violence in Mexico. Kidnappings, extortion, and ruthless executions are common methods used by these syndicates to maintain power. With Wasp now connected to the Sinaloa cartel, many believe his fate was sealed long before that November evening. Following his death, tributes poured in from family, friends, and fans, mourning the tragic loss of a social media star whose life was cut short in the most terrible way. But in the world he was caught up in, there is only one brutal reality. Once you're in, getting out alive isn't certain. Mohit Moore. On May 21st, 2019, Indian TikTok star Mohit Moore was sitting inside a photocopy shop, browse his smartphone, when two young guys burst in wearing helmets. They aimed 2 guns at him and shot so many bullets into his body that his teeth were also found in pieces when police arrived. This terrible incident was the result of 2 things: Mohit's TikTok fame and his connection to one of India's most ruthless gangs. 27-year-old Moore was a fitness instructor and famous TikToker in the little town of Najafgarh, Delhi. Before his passing, he had gathered over 500,000 followers in a record-breaking period of just 8 months. And to the normal TikToker, that's an almost impossible thing to accomplish. But for Moore, it was just the start of his end. On April 3, 2019, a court in India prohibited the use of TikTok on the basis of making its young users susceptible to abuse. Now, this restriction was lifted a few weeks later. However, some people felt it necessary to put an end to the vices caused by this Chinese-owned application, beginning with its top influencers. Moore didn't quite fit into this criteria, but his impact on young Indians was very overwhelming. His persona of a hard-on-the-outside, bad boy with a good heart was similar to his real self, and he worked to make every post better than the last. More feeling, more amusement, more everything. In one video, he got out of his car and gave his expensive shoes to a homeless man who who had broken his sandals. In others, he would croon, dance, tell jokes, and show off his gym-built physique. The goal was to keep up the pace, and thousands of followers were watching his videos. Some would even spot him on the streets. Wherever he traveled in Najafgarh or Dwarka, people requested selfies from him. Girls and boys hoped to be in his videos, until something strange occurred. Mohit Moore had aided a friend to invest 30 lakh rupees in real estate through a criminal property dealer named Mangu. Mangu had a series of legit businesses, but underground, he was a crime boss with many enemies, one of whom was a drug lord named Dalal. Now, out of malice, Dalal ordered the murder of Mangu, putting an end to his empire. But what Dalal didn't realize was that Mangu wasn't the leader of his criminal organization. It was a different man named Pahalwan. So after Mangu's passing, Pahalwan took over all he had, including his mainstream properties. Now at this juncture, Moore and his friend occupied one property previously owned by Mangu. While Moore failed to make the 30 lakh rupee payment he was meant to, Pahalwan pressured Moore to pay up, but he declined, insisting that he owed Mangu and not him. This left him with no other choice than to order the killing of Mohit Moore. One of the individuals involved in this murder was a teenage gang member in Delhi. According to sources, this teen was recruited by Pahalwan after he bothered the crime lord to take him under his wing. To test himself, Pahalwan sent him along with another member of his to find Moore. When they arrived at his location, they emptied over a dozen bullets into his body, leaving behind a bloody scene for the police. In the end, the adolescent was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, while Pahalwan fled Delhi, knowing the police would stop at nothing to bring him down.